Dear friends, in this presentation, we will discuss the role of nutrition in patients with chronic liver disease. As we all know, malnutrition is common in any patient with liver disease. It is present in up to 20% patients with compensated cirrhosis, whereas in decompensated cirrhosis, it is present in up to 50% patients. And in cirrhosis, there is both loss of fat and muscle. In females, predominantly there will be loss of fat, while in males, it is predominantly loss of muscle. So, what is the impact of malnutrition in cirrhosis patients? Why should we know that? See, patients who have malnutrition have higher rate of complications. They have higher risk for infections, hepatic encephalopathy, and high incidence of ascites. Also, they have quite lower survival compared to well-nourished patients. Both cirrhotic patients and transplant recipients who are undernourished have a lower survival compared to well-nourished patients. So, the objective of this talk is to discuss regarding nutritional assessment in patients with liver disease, how to assess these patients from the nutritional point of view, from dietitian point of view, and the second part of the talk will be about nutritional management. So, having known that the patient has malnutrition, what are we going to do in managing those patients? Now, for nutritional assessment, as you all know, we have several tools to assess. There are nutritional screenings tools, there are hospital based scores, and there is something called sarcopenia assessment, dietary interviews. So, this is a multidisciplinary nutritional assessment. We will go through it one by one. So, first and foremost, there are two simple criteria to stratify patients at high risk of malnutrition. One is the criteria that is used in any patient with who comes to the hospital. If they have a BMI less than 18.5, then it is supposed to be an underweight BMI. So, these patients have a high risk of malnutrition, and patients who have advanced decompensated cirrhosis, what we call Child-Pugh category C patients. So these two patients run a risk of malnutrition. So in general, a patient who comes to the hospital with liver disease will be screened for these two criteria. One, whether they have a low BMI. Second, they have whether they have a Child-Pugh C status. If yes, then they go for detailed nutritional assessment and nutritional management plan. If no, then they go for periodic nutritional assessments. So, other thing that we need to know is these patients should have periodic assessment, so that every time they come to the hospital, we should be looking for malnutrition in these patients. So this is a Royal Free Hospital score, which is a score designed by the Royal Free Hospital Group. It is a nutritional prioritizing tool. It is a simple tool. It just takes less than 3 minutes to administer, and it can be used by non-specialized staff. And it has been shown that if there is improvement in score, it is associated with improved survival. So this is one objective way of assessing malnutrition, and this can be downloaded from the website. If you can type this in the website in Google, you will be able to download these forms. So this will give you a degree of objectivity to your patient evaluation. And if someone is interested in research, maybe you have to use tools like this for your data gathering. Second, sarcopenia assessment. So, is there a muscle loss in these patients? How are we going to assess that? See, generally it is done by radiologist by doing a CT scan at the level of L3 vertebra. The muscle cross-sectional area of muscles, namely the psoas, paraspinal muscles, this will be taken. This will be calculated, and it is normalized to patient height. So the index is now the normal value is 50 for men and 39 for women. If the value comes out to be less than this, then they are diagnosed to have sarcopenia. Bedside anthropometric tools, you are all very much aware of that. These are this mid-arm circumference, tricep skin fold thickness, mid-arm muscular area. So these things are definitely available, and the low mid-arm circumference is found to be an independent predictor of mortality after liver transplant. Other thing I am interested in is what is called the hand grip dynamometry. It is a very simple and very effective test. It is bedside. It can be done bedside, and it has been shown by several studies that it predicts complications of cirrhosis, and also it can predict mortality. When I do my ICU rounds, I ask the patients to grip my own hand to see how there is the strength of their grip. So this will give an indirect assessment for me whether they can be taken off ventilator, whether they can be taken out of bed and made to ambulate. So this is a very simple test, and slowly by being in clinical practice for long years, you will be able to assess it even bedside by your own assessment of the patient when they grip the hand of grip your hand. So this is something that I teach students also, that you have to have this assessment very frequently as part of your rounds in the ICU, and as a pre-operative setting also. If we are going to treat malnourished patients, if we can assess their hand grip, if it is tight enough, then probably their reserves are good. And for more interested audience, you have several other measures like frailty index, subjective global assessment. These are tailored for liver patients also, like the Royal Free Hospital assessment scale. So all these things can also be used. One thing of particular interest for the dietitian will be reported dietary intake. So how are they going to assess what the patient is actually taking? So this should be done by a detailed dietary interview. This provides practical information for the dietitians for nutritional interventions. They should be able to identify what and how much the patient is willing and capable of eating, and also they can determine specific nutrient deficiencies that needs to be corrected. And detailed assessment, as you all know, should include what food they are taking, how much they are taking, what liquid meals they are taking, and any supplements they are taking. So that should be taken into consideration, along with number of meals and what timing they are taking, as well as calorie and protein intake. A kind of calculation should also be done to assess how much calorie and protein intake the patient is taking. And we should also assess whether they have any barriers to eating, like many patients have multiple drugs, so there can be drug induced nausea and vomiting, and there will be aversion of food due to low taste, and these patients are advised low salt foods. So naturally low salt foods have less taste and they will be unpalatable. Patients can have early satiety. Patients can have pain, diarrhea, or constipation. So these factors also should be taken into consideration. And once found, this can be discussed with the hepatologist or the liver transplant surgeon, and then it can be addressed so that patient does not reduce his or her calorie or protein intake. One handy test when we do the dietary interview is what is called the 24-hour recall technique, where if the patient is asked to recall what they have taken in the last 24 hours, then we will have a fair idea what they are taking. So this is a short-term recall, so the less burdensome for patients, less likely to alter eating behavior than food records, and it can be used across diverse populations as it does not require high level of literacy. Another way of accurately knowing what the patient is taking is a 3-day food diary, where you can ask the patient to write down what they are eating, and then when they come for the next assessment, you can have a look at the food diary. So these things can be done. One important thing that I would like to tell the audience is how to calculate BMI or body weight in cirrhosis, because as you know, cirrhosis patients will have ascites. They come with a big tummy with 5 or 6 liters of fluid inside, and many patients will also have pedal edema, like there will be fluid in the accumulating in the legs. So how to calculate their actual weight? So there are several ways that are proposed. One is what is called a patient's dry weight can be calculated using a post-paracentesis body weight, where after the doctor taps the patient, after tapping how much the patient is weighing, that is one measure of the patient's dry weight. Or if we have a weight recorded before fluid retention or ascites has set in, that can be taken into account as a dry weight. Sometimes if these things are not available, then we can subtract a percentage of weight based on the severity of ascites. For example, if they have a mild ascites, 5% of weight can be reduced, moderate 10%, and severe 15% of their weight can be reduced, and then their dry weight is calculated. Additional 5% is subtracted if they have a bilateral pedal edema. So this is one way of calculating the dry weight and thereby BMI. So coming on to the second part of the talk, how are we going to manage these patients from nutritional point of view? So some scientific thing that we need to know is cirrhosis is a state of accelerated starvation. By that what I mean is there is no protein synthesis, there is only proteolysis. Uh, there is gluconeogenesis happening. Because of gluconeogenesis, whereby from amino acids glucose is produced, amino acid comes from proteins, protein comes from muscles, so there will be proteolysis in muscles that results in sarcopenia. And this gluconeogenesis occurs, uh, uh, and this itself is a energy requiring reaction. So there is going to be a lot of resting energy expenditure in patients with cirrhosis. So this thing we need to know before countering the patients nutritionally, so that this cycle can be altered. Further, we have other problems in cirrhotic patients where if they have portal hypertension, there is portal hypertensive enteropathy, where the gut is not functioning as well. There can be impaired gut motility. There can be decreased nutritional absorption. You can see on the right side, the mucosa is everything is edematous, so we can't expect a good gut absorption in these patients, leading to protein losing enteropathy. So this is another problem that we need to have in mind before designing a dietary plan for these patients. And there are several places where there will be inappropriate dietary protein restriction. The doctor or the nurse will be advising too much of protein restriction, so that should be avoided. And when these patients get hospitalized for endoscopies and other procedures like tapping, sometimes they get admitted in the ICU for hepatic encephalopathy. So these are the periods when they will be kept nil by mouth, and this adds to the malnutrition in these patients. So all these things has to be considered. That is the reason I used to tell we need a specialty dietitian who can focus on liver diseases, and this definitely improves outcomes in these patients. So to start with calories in cirrhosis, how much they need. So the general goal is to supply around 35 calories per kg body weight per day. So this is what we have to aim at. It should be 35 kilocalories per kg body weight. In patients with compensated cirrhosis, it can be little less. For decompensated cirrhosis, it should be little more. So this is the calorie goal in patients with cirrhosis. An important diet modification in these patients will be a nighttime snack, because if they have a prolonged period of fasting, there can be accelerated proteolysis, that is muscle loss and sarcopenia. And as you all know, longest intermeal duration will be in the night. So what is advised in these patients is to have a late night snack, so that they don't have a empty stomach throughout the night. And breakfast containing proteins is also important. So nighttime snack is something that has to be informed to these patients. How much protein these patients should take? This we have to note that it is 1.2 to 1.5 gram per kg per day. This prevents loss of muscle mass and it can reverse muscle loss in patients who are sarcopenic. And another thing that we need to know is these patients are several of these patients are protein restricted for the fear of hepatic encephalopathy, but several studies have shown us that there is no need for protein restriction in these patients, so they can have normal or higher than normal protein intake. This has an impact in outcome. Patients who have good protein intake have a longer survival, and it can even improve the mental status. So, a particular approach to sarcopenia, as you know, skeletal muscle is the largest protein store in the body. A balance between skeletal muscle protein synthesis and breakdown is responsible for protein homeostasis, what is called proteostasis. This maintains the muscle mass. So, what are the strategies we have to improve the muscle mass? One is dietary manipulation. What I have already told is increase their protein intake, don't decrease. Second, increased physical activity. They should be doing household work. They should be able to climb stairs and go to their offices or workplaces or home. They should be involved in light exercise. There are some instances where hormone replacement therapies, ammonia lowering strategies, and treating the underlying liver disease. These are all part of the liver transplant team or the hepatology team, which is going to pay particular attention to. But as dietitians, the dietary manipulation and advice towards having a increased physical activity is important. Other thing is, as dietitians, you will be seeing patients who are admitted in the ICU with cirrhosis and its complications, and what kind of regimen has to be advised for them, whether they can take enteral nutrition or parenteral nutrition. Enteral nutrition has to be started as early as possible, as early as feasible in patients who are admitted in the hospital. Parenteral nutrition can have beneficial role in prolonged periods of poor oral intake. Suppose patients cannot take orals for a long time, then you can think about parenteral nutrition. Like encephalopathy, patient is ventilated, we cannot start nasogastric feeds, then parenteral nutrition can be done. Patients who have gastrointestinal bleeding, patients who have ileus, so these patients, short period of parenteral nutrition can be done. Most important is they should be given the calories and protein that they need. We should not reduce their protein or calorie in a day, either enterally or parenterally. We should be able to provide the patient with the necessary calories and proteins. So, coming to exercise and physical activity, what to advise? See, endurance or aerobic exercise improves skeletal muscle functional capacity, its contractile strength. Resistance exercise promotes muscle mass. Now, cirrhosis patients have both impaired or reduced muscle mass and impaired contractility or the functional capacity. So, what is advised in these patients is a combination of both resistance and endurance exercises. Now we have a special situation called sarcopenic obesity, where uh, there are several patients who are obese. They have non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, or what is called NASH, and this can progress to cirrhosis. And these patients are obese to start with, and due to the onset of cirrhosis, they will have muscle loss and muscle is replaced by fat. So this is called sarcopenic obesity. So even though the patient appears to be like fatty patients, in reality they don't have muscle at all, and reduction in muscle is going to impact their mortality. So what nutrition in these patients? The nutrition will be moderately hypocaloric, that is 500 to 800 kilocalories per day. However, protein intake should not be compromised, and it should be like more than 1.5 gram protein per day. Some special situations like hepatic encephalopathy need some change in diet plan. Previously, protein restriction was one of the central principles of managing hepatic encephalopathy, because the more protein you take, the more ammonia is produced, and this ammonia can result in hepatic encephalopathy. But recent research has shown that protein restriction is harmful. So, protein restriction should only be done whenever it is necessary, and that too for a short periods of time, like patients who have overt and severe hepatic encephalopathy and GI bleed, and patients with HE tolerate diets with a normal protein content. So, this is an important thing, that you should never advise protein restriction in these patients. So, what type of protein we ingest is probably becoming more important nowadays. What has been found that dairy protein is much better tolerated in these patients compared to protein from non-vegetarian or mixed sources, and vegetable protein is much better tolerated than meat protein. So, maybe a change in protein is something that can be advised in these patients. If you are using branch chain amino acids, it has been shown that branch chain amino acid supplements in divided doses can facilitate the provision of an adequate nitrogen intake in these patients, especially patients who are intolerant to meat protein, and long-term oral BCCA supplementation have nutritional value as well. So this is probably decided by the hepatologist, and the dietitian can discuss with the hepatologist whether the patient has to be supplemented with branch chain amino acids. So, if a patient is admitted with gastrointestinal bleeding, what are we going to do? See, generally, nasoenteric tube feeding can be done in these patients, and we don't have to, like, the patient has a bleeding varices, bleeding is from the esophagus, so we cannot put a tube inside. So, that is a myth, where these patients can be safely placed on a Ryle's tube and started on feeding. Maybe for a period of 48 hours to 72 hours, enteral nutrition can be withheld because it increases the splanchnic blood flow, and there can be a increase in portal pressure, increasing the risk of variceal rebleed. So, only for a very brief period of time, enteral feeding can be withheld, and even during these periods, parenteral nutrition can be started. So, in GI bleed, tube feeding can be done as early as possible. So, in patients who undergo liver transplantation, what kind of feeding and when to start with? See, patients who undergo liver transplantation should be started on orals as early as possible. For example, in our hospital, when we do liver transplant, we start them on next day on orals. So, it has been shown that starting early enteral nutrition reduces infection rates in these patients, and the necessary calorie and protein is 35 kilocalories per kg body weight and 1.5 gram per kg body weight. So this is about the nutritional intervention in patients with liver disease. So to conclude, dear friends, we all know that malnutrition is quite common in patients with liver disease. It increases morbidity and mortality in these patients. Periodic nutritional assessment is essential to identify malnutrition. Nutritional intervention has improved outcomes in patients with liver disease. Dietitians are essential to the multidisciplinary team that manages these patients, and by providing nutrition, the patient's outcome is going to be very good. Thank you very much. Thank you.